Hello and welcome to the Brád-Cast. My name is Anthony Brady and this is episode 3. Today's discussion, today's debate, today's white man speaks into a microphone. I'm going to be talking about capacity planning. The reason I'm going to be talking about capacity planning is because it is my opinion, long-held opinion, that, we talk about workforce management, and previous episode 2, please go back and listen to it, give it a like, give it a share. There's a lot in workforce management. There's a lot of different functions, a lot of different areas, but arguably, and that's what we're going to talk about today, arguably the most important kind of aspect of workforce management is the very, 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 very beginning, which is capacity planning. And the reason I say that is because what I have found over the years is that when we get to those moments when things are not going well, such as those days where it's our service levels are just consistently underperforming, or our KPIs, whatever they may be, but our KPIs are just not where we need them to be. I can't tell you how many times I've seen operational people and also workforce management people as well kind of going off on sort of wild goose chases, kind of like what like trying to figure it out, right? So it's kind of like, okay, is it our productivity, and or is it our absenteeism? Did we have technical problems? Is our forecast accurate? Is it was it the World Cup game that was on the telly? People will look at things, and here's the problem. Sometimes you will find, I'm going to use the phrase false flag, right? Because sometimes you might find something and it appears to be evidence of something, right? So you might kind of go, yeah, our forecast is off, or whatever. You might find something and therefore you might draw a conclusion. And the very dangerous thing that starts to happen then is that it starts to get written down, reported around, going, the reason why we are currently off is because our forecast is wrong. We've too many contacts coming in, or it's because our absenteeism is high and we need to focus on that. And I don't want to come back to all of those items probably in a later episode when we talk more specifically about operational management and kind of reporting and stuff like that. But here's the thing, right? More often than not, the first question that needs to be asked when things are going wrong is quite simply, how many people are we supposed to have in the building or hired? How many people are we supposed to be at this moment in time? And, often people can kind of start to answer that question going, oh yeah, well, we're 50 people. Going, okay, I understand we are 50 people. Is that how many people we believed would be the right number of people to have in the building or hired at this particular moment in time? And, this is what kind of eventually all paths hopefully will lead back to the capacity planning report. And lo and behold, you might find that the true answer starts to reveal itself very, very quickly. And what you start to find then is like, how many people are we supposed to have right now? Oh well, according to capacity planning, we're supposed to have 60 people. And you're like, right, but we don't have that, right? We've only got 50. Yeah. Oh yeah, but we're doing this. We're really focused on our productivity, and we think that one is balancing out the other and hold on. And it's like kind of, whoa, hold on, and just pause for a moment. Capacity planning said we were supposed to have 60 people. We don't have 60 people. That is probably the start of all of our problems. And I've always I've learned, and I try to frame problem like when people are describing kind of like what's going on, why are things the way they are. It's like, okay, well, here it is, right? Because guess what, 50 people can't do 60 people's work, right? That's just the way it is. Now, we could argue and we could debate for a while of like, okay, well, if we apply pressure to 50 people and we, shall we say, motivate them, we can probably get 50 people to outperform or overperform. And it could be argued that maybe it is possible to get 50 people to deliver what would be the equivalent of 60 people's work. But you can't do that long term. And there's just no way. There's no way. Because if it was possible to get 50 people to do 60 people's work, then a whole industry's workload calculations would be out the window, right? Because 50 is not 60. It's a different number, right? And that's really, really important. And that's why I wanted to kind of, early in these episodes, I wanted to kind of talk about capacity planning, because as these episodes go by, I am going to probably refer back to this concept, right? This concept of like, well, what was the big picture plan? And kind of coming back to it, because I don't think enough people really appreciate just how important the capacity plan is in the life cycle of workforce management. So that's kind of like why I think it is so important. So let's dive into this now. The next thing I want to do is, I think in episode 2, I think I probably stated something slightly incorrect. I think I probably said capacity planning and budget, sometimes referred to as budget planning, as if capacity planning and budget planning are one and the same. They are almost one and the same, but they are of course different. The key difference between them is they've just got slightly different lenses, right? Capacity planning is primarily concerned with figuring out what is the true capacity need to service our customers, or to service our customers, whatever that might be. It's about really, really kind of digging deep into what is the shape of our business. What's our workload, and then also kind of what is the type of environment it is that we're trying to run here. So that's capacity planning 101, right? Budget planning, however, it's all of those things, but with a very, very strong financial lens on it, which is like how many people can, what's the number of people, what's our budget plan, because guess what, here's $10 million or here's $100 million or whatever the $1 million it is. So everything that we do has to fit in there, and so I suppose, and just glancing at my notes here, is that the difference between capacity planning and budget planning usually gets put to the test where every organization on earth says people are our greatest asset until budget season comes around. Everyone walks into, oh yeah, we love our people and we want to do whatever's right for our customers, whatever the right thing is, until a capacity plan team sits down and says, right, here's everything going in, right? Here's our forecast. Here's here's seasonality, growth, marketing activities, risk events, everything that's going in there, and then also taking into account on the supply side, like the kind of level of shrinkage we anticipate, the attrition, productivity, scheduling efficiency will be in there as well. And somebody bakes it all in and then says, right, all in, we need, let's just stick with 60 people, right? Because I've got that number going now, right? Somebody says we need 60 people. It's probably at that point then that someone in finance will say, 60 people, that's going to cost me whatever amount of dollars. I can't afford that. Now I need you to go and figure this out with just 50 people, because 50 people is all we can really afford. I've been through that process. Sometimes it gets referred to as the make it fit. Let's make a capacity plan where it makes it fit, and that kind of opens up a whole world of, personally, I think it opens up a world of, it invites, shall we say, it invites mistruths or hallucinations to happen, right? Where suddenly people will, in order to make it fit, people are going to engage in things like, if our productivity was 10% better, that would shave X amount of dollars, and that would get us closer to what it is we're trying to do here. And people will go, yep, sign me up for that. It's like, yeah, but how? But how are you going to actually make that happen in reality? And it kind of gets filed away, and it's like, well, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, because fundamentally we're making a capacity plan, we're making an exercise for, like, that's kind of 6 to 12 months away from here. We, by the time we get there, we'll figure it out. So anyway, that's kind of my own personal icky feeling when it comes to this whole idea of making it fit. So anyway, back to capacity planning and what it is, right? So demand and supply. So I'd mentioned just there briefly, like, some of the things. So let's go through some of these things more specifically, right? So on the demand side, is a forecast, obviously, right? It's I do plan to do a dedicated episode on just forecasting, and forecasting techniques, and how people do it and all this sort of stuff. But, like, I suppose that just for now, if anyone is not aware, the genesis for almost every forecast is historical information. History is a predictor of the future. That's usually it, and usually some kind of time series analysis to kind of understand things like seasonality. This concept that usually things are quieter in the summer for most businesses and organizations because people are off enjoying their life, their summer holidays, and they don't necessarily have as much time to be ringing a contact center. If you're in some sort of sales or anything to do with kind of anything that's connected at all to the holiday season around Christmas time, that's usually the busiest time because people kind of lose their mind and can't wait to spend all their money. Things go wrong and they want to ring customer service and kind of talk it through. So this idea that throughout you don't get a steady flow of contacts throughout the year is called seasonality. Growth projections. Yes, every business wants to grow, and again, history would be a predictor here, because if you look back at your business, you will have seen that, like, 5 years ago we were at this, and then you can see that there's, like, we went from year 1 to year 2 to year 3, and you start to pick up a pattern, where hopefully the story is that your business is growing. So as your business is getting bigger, so too then is your demand for customer service. You're kind of, it's called a contact rate. So that's another part of the puzzle. Product launches. Obviously every business will probably at some point say, yeah, so at some point in halfway through next year we are planning to launch I don't know, something that sounds cool, Gizmo X, and from a capacity planning perspective, you're like, okay, great, what's that going to do? Is the launch of Gizmo X, is that going to create more customers, therefore more customer demand, contact rate? Is it going to improve is it going to make more complicated in the whole lot? Now, this is where capacity planning is really, really difficult, because it's kind of easy to predict or forecast volume, and it's kind of easy to predict kind of growth, but when it comes to kind of predicting the likely impact of a new product, and what that's going to do, that's a really, really tricky business. And and you have to kind of capacity planners have to kind of wade through a little bit of kind of filter out, I suppose, the over optimism, because the people who obviously will come to the table and saying, this is what we've been working on, this product launch, and it's going to do whatever, it's kind of like, have you got any evidence? Have we ever launched anything like this before, similar to this before? How do we know? Are we really, really going to kind of build a strategy for our business long term around this guy or girl saying that we're launching Gizmo X and it's going to do whatever it's going to do? Product launches are tricky business, and usually they hopefully if you're in workforce management and someone is talking about Gizmo X, and they want to know kind of your help in trying to understanding what it's going to mean. Hopefully there is a ton of meetings and discussions and debate, and kind of like, you'll get into all sorts of like what if scenarios. Well, what if Gizmo X is, craps out? What if Gizmo X is unbelievably more successful than we're even thinking? You got to walk through all them and kind of build in a good contingency for all that kind of stuff. Marketing, yeah. Marketing. So what do I want to say about marketing? I learned my experience with marketing is I was back in PayPal, and I learned that the way the marketing team operated. Let me back that up. Let me start that again, because I'm not phrasing that very well at all. There used to be recurring, shall we call them moments, like where the marketing group will have launched something into the space, and I think it was coupons. And when they launched, it obviously caused a big spike or whatever. But here was the thing: there was a period of time there when these coupons would launch, and more often than not, they malfunctioned, or whatever associated budget that was given to them would dry up and run out really, really quickly, and therefore, the impression was then that they weren't working, and it was driving volume, and it was driving all our service levels in the wrong direction, etc., etc. And because this used to happen a lot, eventually, kind of workforce management people, being who they are, extremely nosy, they get in with the marketing people. And what we found out was very interesting, is that the marketing group at that time, they had an allocated budget to work on marketing activities inside a given time frame. Like, let's say an amount of budget to spend in a month or in a 6-month period, or whatever it might be. And they were on this sort of use it or lose it mode, which meant that if they were given $250,000 to spend, and obviously their goal is like spend on marketing activity and then therefore show customer growth, etc., etc. So we get what they're trying to do. But if they didn't spend it, somebody would take it off them and say, oh, listen, we're going to take that money back. So what would happen is that they would get towards very close to the end of it, realize they had not spent it, and they'd panic and they'd go, oh, I need to get rid of this money. So they would hastily and hurriedly put together a coupon campaign. It hadn't been fully tested, it hasn't been fully thought through. It was just out there. From their perspective, it's like it just needs to get out there. And of course, then we were into into a space of like, well, they're not working now. Now we're dealing with the fallout of that extra volume and complaints and all that goes with that. But yeah, that was kind of one of my experiences with marketing. And as a capacity planner, it's almost impossible to, know, because like upfront a marketer might tell you, oh yeah, we're going to be launching, the plan is that we're going to launch X amount of coupons or some other marketing activity throughout the year. What they're not going to tell you though is that, oh yeah, you can probably anticipate that when we launch our marketing initiatives, maybe 50% of them won't go well. They won't tell you that because of course everyone's an optimist. Everyone is, everyone thinks everything they do is perfect and everything they do is going to be wonderful and just, marketing. Maybe we'll do an episode on marketing because there'll be an excuse for me to talk about Bill Hicks for a little bit, if nothing else. Anyways, that's all stuff on the demand side. Now the supply side is arguably more interesting stuff because it's more about the environment and the space that we're trying to create, right? And it really tests the quality of leaders' statements around how much they care about their people, right? So like what's on the supply side? So the headcount that we've currently got, obviously, right, is there. So that's our supply, right? Then shrinkage, we are definitely going to have an episode on shrinkage. Don't you worry about it. But yeah, shrinkage is basically all of that, the amount of time where people are not specifically with the customer. They're employed to be here. So we're talking about things like there's in office and out of office shrinkage. So there's all, so think about it, right? So there's holiday time, sickness time. Then when they're in the office, there's breaks and lunches. Then there's meetings and coachings and there's a dear friend of mine, if he's listening, he'll know what I'm saying. Sometimes there's the thing called tea break or cake breaks, which was a particularly great example we came across. All of this time where people are basically employed to be inside a contact center, but not actually working directly productively with the customer, all adds up into a big bucket called shrinkage, and it needs to be planned carefully. Now, if you kind of think about it, shrinkage is a great measure of to what degree does the employer want the employee to enjoy amounts of time like that. So I actually started my career in an environment long time ago. I worked for a company called Conduit, who provided services for 11850, showing my age there, which was a directory inquiry long before like the internet age and all that. People used to have to ring up and ask for phone numbers. But anyway, the point being is that Conduit ran a contact center with bare bones legally required amounts of shrinkage. So like, agents were employed to sit on the phone for 8-9 hours a day, and barring their mandated I think was it a half an hour? Maybe it was a half an hour lunch and a couple of breaks. That was it. And it was a pretty tough environment to be in. Very occasionally, maybe once in a month, you might escape the phone to go and attend a meeting. And even at that meeting was extremely likely to be pulled at any moment because there's calls in the queue or whatever. But they ran a very, very tight ship. So therefore, what they did was they created an environment where it felt like it wasn't an extremely pleasant environment to be in, and as such the attrition rate, the turnover rate was extremely high. But that was their business model. It was a different time. We're talking, this is back in 2002 2003, something like that. Finding workforce was easy in Dublin back then. It was like, okay, come in. The kind of the mindset, no one ever said this out loud, by the way, but the kind of the mood was, come in, train for a week or two, sit on the phone, give us what you got for, and if you give us what you got for 6 months, great. After 6 months, if you've decided that this is just not a nice place to work, okay, fine. But things, they were a bit of an outlier. Most organizations want their employees to feel like that they enjoy coming to work, right? And that it's not, that it is a place where, that they don't feel like that they're kind of shackled to their desk, and that, that there are moments in their day where they can have a bit of breathing space to do other things that are not always just answering the phone or writing an email or whatever it is. Usually kind of somewhere in around 30%, 35%, something like that, is kind of like the, shall we call it, the industry standard. How much more above that number or how much below that number you go is really a measure of, like, you're setting the tone. Shrinkage is a huge part of the supply piece, and is a huge part of capacity planning, because it's a massive variable. It's a massive controllable variable, by the way. And we like I said, when we get to talk about shrinkage, I'll have a lot to say about that. Attrition is a measurement of how what rate at which people are actually leaving your organization. People will always leave your organization. They just will, even if you're like the greatest company on, who is the greatest company on earth? I don't know. But people will leave for all sorts of reasons, and you want to be tracking that and measuring that. And if it's trending upwards, that's a signal that something is not quite right, and it might be tied, and probably is tied to what I just said a moment before about that sort of the environment that you're providing. And it, so attrition is on the supply side, and it's an interesting metric to measure. Productivity, obviously the speed at which people do their work will definitely have an episode on productivity. I think there's been all sorts of studies over the years about, whether targeting productivity is a good idea or a bad idea. Historically, typically, it is targeted. People are usually, when they come to work in an environment, they're told, hey, your job is to answer phone calls or answer an email, or these days a chat, sometimes concurrently answer multiple chats at the same time. And you're set an expectation, a very clear expectation, that your job is, we want you to get through these at a rate of, or a speed of, 2 minutes per call, 10 minutes per call, whatever it might be. And then there's components to that. There's wrap up time and hold time and all that kind of stuff is in there. But yeah, productivity, and that needs to be very, very, very clearly understood and agreed upon as to what they are. And like back to what I was saying a moment ago about, it's easy to, the idea of hallucinations, it's very easy for someone to say, oh yeah, sure, let's just take 20 seconds off or 30 seconds off the productivity assumption, as if, these things don't happen, by magic, and everything has a consequence. So that's it. I'll finish up by saying, on the supply side, schedule efficiency. Of course, we will have an episode on scheduling as well. I can't wait to get this podcast gets to the point where I've already gotten all these sort of setup episodes out of the way, and hopefully, you as an audience will have kind of, you're on board with me, and we can talk a little bit more freely, and it's not always me just saying I'm going to have an episode on whatever. But anyway, scheduling is obviously incredibly important in the workforce management space. We're talking today specifically about capacity planning. So capacity planning, what they really, really want to know about the scheduling is to how effective is the scheduling. And again, this is kind of similar to what I was just saying about the shrinkage. You could schedule your workforce in a way that is very pleasant, or you could schedule your workforce in a way that is extremely unpleasant, and then that ties and connects to attrition and absenteeism and all of those sort of things, right? Now, what do I mean by pleasant? What's pleasant scheduling and unpleasant scheduling? Most people, what they want when they work anywhere in any role, is they probably typically have an idea of Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 in their head. The Dolly Parton syndrome, right? That's what people have in their mind, and probably what is most desirable, so that they have their weekends available and free to enjoy their life and do what they want, and even most of their evenings. But that's not how business works, or that's not how typically, customers kind of almost have the opposite. Because if you kind of think about it, a lot of customers and a lot of businesses, when they are finished doing their 9 to 5, it's then from that 5 o'clock period on till about maybe, 8, 9 o'clock, they come home and they want to take care of the other stuff in their life. And some of that stuff might be, oh yeah, I must give whoever it is a ring because I didn't understand something, I didn't, and so quite often the customer needs is directly opposite to what the agents working inside those organizations actually want, and that's the conflict, right? Now, the schedule efficiency is how closely is workforce planning the schedules to match what the demand profile that's actually out there. Almost nobody gets this perfect, and the ones that do get it quote unquote perfect is probably creating an environment that's extremely unpleasant. And there's a couple of no-nos out there. There's a couple of kind of, under no circumstances do this, but the kind of things I'm talking about is that sometimes do not, when you have to give people days off work, try to be consecutive days, because so the people don't like having gone, oh yeah, how are you working next week? Oh, I think I've got Tuesday and Friday off. That's usually not that ideal for people. And when we get to our scheduling episode, we'll talk about all the kind of permutations and all the different types of people, because not everyone is the same. Everyone's lives are different and they've got different needs and stuff like that. But I'll tell you another big no-no is that when people have a basic expectation that when they do show up for a day's work, it is a continuous period of 8 or 9 hours. There is a thought process out there that this idea of split shifts, where people could potentially be scheduled to come to work for, let's say, 8 o'clock to 12 o'clock, then we don't need you again until 5 o'clock later in the day. So between 12 o'clock and 5 o'clock, you're free to go and do whatever it is you want. You know, there are people out there where that type of scenario might suit them brilliantly, but this all goes under this banner of schedule efficiency. And these are all the components that need to be captured by our capacity planner. What next? So yeah, a good capacity planner is balancing all of these different needs: the customer experience, the employee well-being, and the financial reality. So what I want to do next is I want to move on to something else that the capacity planner has to deal with, and it's padding. So what is padding? Padding is somebody, usually an operational person, trying to overinflate the true need of what they need. So like when we're trying to work out a capacity plan, and it's like, okay, what's your anticipated productivity going to be? A great one would be padding opportunities usually crop up around what I was talking about earlier about new products coming in. This would be a great opportunity for an unscrupulous person to say, oh God, that new product, when that comes in, that's probably going to drive my handle time from 5 minutes and probably maybe up to 10 minutes. Now, because no one knows for a fact what it's going to be. What's the phrase in the in the kingdom of the blind, the one-eyed man is king or something. But in an environment where nobody actually really knows for sure, who's to say who's right and who's wrong? So there's an opportunity here for someone to say, I think it's going to be 10 minutes. Now the person who's saying it might truly if they were being truthful and completely honest, and they were to say, okay, really, I don't think it's going to be 10 minutes, I think it's going to be 8 minutes, but they're trying to convince 10 minutes to go in. There's a bit of extra padding in there because it creates extra capacity, which when it plays out, if it turns out that, well, it wasn't 10 minutes, it was actually more like the 8 minutes, that extra space, that extra capacity can now be used in other areas by the operational person to kind of maybe put back into additional shrinkage maybe, which helps to improve that environment. It might help to kind of allow enough wiggle room, enough capacity in the whole picture to create better scheduling, and again create a better environment. Operational people, and rightly so, is one of their major goals in life is to make the operation as attractive and as pleasant a place to be in as possible. So padding, I get it, but it's something that needs to be encountered by the capacity planner. And it leads me to two words, I think, really, right? So we're into capacity planning now, runs into the word trust, and it runs into the word politics. So the trust thing is, I think that's fairly self-explanatory. It's when we're sitting down to make these capacity plans, and people are saying, this is what's going to happen, this is what our growth is going to be, this is going to be the effect to productivity, this is going to be the effect of even our forecast. All of this kind of boils down to trust. The padding, putting trust and padding together, that kind of leads to politics, because here's the thing. All contact centers are a collection of different groups of people who, in theory, are all working towards the same goal, right? We're all here to build the best customer service environment to serve our customers in the best way as possible. But like as I mentioned before, when we talk about the difference between capacity planning and budget planning, straight away you see, well, sometimes people have a financial goal in mind, not necessarily a customer experience goal in mind. Operational people, they may have, well, my goal is they may have been set as part of their own kind of their own objectives for the year. You need to improve the agent satisfaction around here. We need to be on that great place to work list. So that might be a motivating factor for them. Other people in the equation might have different, the marketing people, product people. all they really want is they want to show and demonstrate that the product that they've been working on has been successfully launched out there, and once it's out there, that's the number one. Not necessarily is it actually having positive impact to service level, etc., etc. So the point being is that operational environments are usually a melting pot of a lot of different people who've got competing agendas, which is in itself some sort of kind of definition of politics, really. So politics is something that has to be worked out. But I wrote this down here. So think of it like this: if trust wasn't an issue, and everyone was actually on the same page and working towards the same goal, would capacity planning even be needed? And probably the answer is no. You could probably fully automate this whole thing if that was it. So really the mere existence of capacity planning is evidence of a certain level of mistrust and a level of politics that needs to be managed somehow, right? So you could, we could go down the road of saying that capacity planning really is the political, the political balance, in the whole equation. And for me personally, I've learned that I am fundamentally wired for transparency rather than political negotiation. So I'm not great at politics at all. I can be a very, very sort of slightly naive and kind of like, but what about the customer? And it's kind of always where my head is at, and I struggle sometimes to really kind of negotiate my way through other characters who, while they're telling me and they're using the words going, yes, I care about the customer, but really they seem to be displaying through their actions that they're more focused or more concerned on something else, and that something else would appear to be going against delivering a great customer experience. But because uncertainty exist, and because humans exist, capacity planning remains, and it's deeply strategic. It's deeply strategic. So capacity planning, bringing it back to the start, great words there. If hopefully what I want you to take away from this episode, and what I want you to take away from kind of listening to me now for quite a while about capacity planning, is that if you get this right, having a good capacity plan in place as a reference point, which is that, so when at some point in the operation, as we're traveling through time, as we go through May, as we go through June, we're getting ready for Christmas and the whole lot, that you can ground so many of your conversations in, do we even have the right number of people in place right now? Because even and you might find that the reality is that the capacity plan, back to what I think we were saying about 50 and 60, wasn't it, at the start? If the capacity plan says we were supposed to be 60 and we've only got 50, and now everyone's running around kind of saying, oh, well, these 50 people, their productivity is not great, or these 50 people, their absenteeism's too high, and the whole lot. It's like, okay, they're all true things, but the fundamental problem here is that we were supposed to have 60. Can someone explain, or can somebody articulate why we don't have 60? Now, the answer might simply be, it might be into human resources and recruiting. Recruiting might say, we've been trying to get 60, but part of your ask was you asked for specifically 5 Dutch people, or you asked for 6, whatever, and we can't find them. Salaries are not competitive enough, or people are just not attracted to work in our environment because they've read Glassdoor, or they've seen the Great Place to Work, they've seen the Great Place to Work list, and we're not on it. So you start to see then why all these other competing elements start to kind of feed in, where then other people in the operation will be set out to say, right, we need to make sure kind of next year we are on that list. So your primary goal in life now is not necessarily to deliver the best customer experience right here, right now, but to make sure that we are creating a better environment, which then in turn then leads to operational people then putting pressure on workforce management to make, quote unquote, better schedules, better schedules may be more advantageous to creating that better environment, but not necessarily better for our customer. So it becomes very, very, it becomes very, very complicated indeed. But I think almost all almost all operations could really, really benefit from grounding all of their conversations in. Let's start with, how many people were we supposed to have? Do we have that? Now, if the answer is, well, capacity planning said we were supposed to have 60 people and we do have 60 people, great. Now we can talk about, well, okay, well, what are the 60 people up to? What's going on with them? And then we can talk about the whys and the why nots, and okay, well, what about our scheduling? And then you can kind of get into some real fine tuning stuff. Then you can kind of like, okay, well, what part of our reality is not lined up with what was baked into the capacity plan? And you might find it's something like, I don't know, whether it's an occupancy level or it's an absenteeism level, and you might find, well, this one's up and this one's down, but I think grounding almost all conversations in workforce management around trying to understand why the performance is delivering in the way it is, grounding it in capacity planning, I think is the thing to me that has always made the most sense. But yeah, and like I said, we'll get into, kind of further down the process here. We'll get into forecasting and scheduling, and then real time management, and then when we've got all these sort of basic kind of grounding episodes behind us, then we can kind of start to kind of bring in some guests and talk about scenarios and, what have you seen, what have I seen, and why do we still do this? Like after 20 years, 30 years, why do we still come back and do it? Because it's deeply, deeply fascinating, I think, and I love it. I love it. So yeah, so with that, I will not hold you hostage too much longer. Episode 3, capacity planning. 42 minutes I'm coming up on. Wow. I guess as these episodes go by, I'm just arguably I'm getting better or worse, I'm not sure, but either way, thank you for your attention, and enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I will see you again next week on the Brád-Cast for episode 4. Thank you. Goodbye.